And it's Late Night Secrets for Voiceover Success once again. And here we are, all the lovely people in December learning about audiobooks. And Tina was just sharing the fact that she just got his gift finishing up with one with 50 characters and how good this would have been 3 weeks ago. But just think, the next book is going to be so good because you're going to be prepped and ready to go. So I'm Rhonda Phillips. If we haven't personally met before, hi, it's nice to meet you, and thank you for being here at this webinar tonight. I am recording, and you will get a replay tomorrow afternoon. Hopefully I can get that to you. If not, it'll be Friday morning, and you will have the opportunity to watch that for the few months on Vimeo. Please don't share your links when I send that to you. And coming up, we have my holiday party. So if you are not yet registered for my holiday extravaganza that Sarah really encouraged me to do this year, I needed a foot in my back to make it happen this year. But we're making it happen because it's Christmas and it's holiday cheer. So I have a ton of things to give away. And between you, me, and the fence post, not a ton of people have signed up yet, which is good for the people that have signed up. So there's more opportunity for you to win. You can walk away with things like a new demo. A lot of coaching is available. I just heard from David Toback with the GVAA, and he's doing some coaching. There's courses, it's all listed on my event page. So if you can be there, because you need to be there to win. So if you can be there the 21st, I would love to have you at my little holiday soiree, and hopefully you could win some cool stuff from some pretty cool people.
And be sure to wear an ugly sweater.
Yes, ugly sweater, creative sweater, funny sweater. We'll be giving prizes for all of those things as well. Oh, and I didn't get to tell you this, Sarah. I thought this was a really cool idea, and I haven't talked to anybody about it. So you tell me if you think this is a cool idea. Rebecca Davis wants to donate $100 to give to somebody to donate to the charity of their choice. So instead of giving, I think that's really cool. I would love that. So she just added that to the pile of prizes. So cool. All right, cool. So without further ado, let's get this party started. In the room, we have Sarah Mitchell. She is my lovely moderator. She is always here helping. And when it comes to questions, this is a little small group. So I think what we'll do is we will have little bits of questions as we move along. So after Trenton finishes one of, a section or whatnot, we'll talk about it right then. So raise your hand virtually down in the reaction button at the bottom. You can raise your hand. We'll call on you. You can unmute and ask your question. Tonight, I don't think Sarah and I need to moderate the questions because there's not that many of us in here. All righty. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Sarah, and she is going to read our bio for our guest tonight.
Lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we have Trenton Bennett with us. He is a voice actor with a wide variety of experiences, from local TV spots and theatre to e-learning and phone voice menus. His primary discipline is audiobooks, and he tackles them with a passion for learning, love of reading, and detail-orientated organizational skills. His work in the audiobook space includes descriptive audio, science fiction, military adventure, romance, inspirational, spiritual, fantasy, and comedy. Trenton is also a very good mimic, making accents and dialects easy to pick up, and he has a training material to drill on 67 different accents and dialects. With a long tech career that included project management, he takes pride in planning ahead and being well organized throughout a project. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Trenton Bennett.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I'm half swooning now. Woo. Thank you. Hi, folks. I'm going to mention I will be asking Sarah to help me when I ask a question in a little bit, because I'm going to be presenting and I won't be able to see your smiling faces the whole time I'm presenting, but we'll flip back and forth. So real quick, as we mentioned, in my other life in IT, I have 2 project management certifications, and that taught me a lot about how to organize and do processes and things. So tonight, what I'm going to show you is the combination of many audiobooks worth of practice and refinement, and it's a system that I use especially for complicated audiobooks. But before we begin, I want to make sure and tell you there's always going to be things about the way you prep and the way you do things that are more comfortable for you. I want to give you a lot of options to expand, but take them with what you know and use those to grow, and know that it's a continuous process. You can always come up with little ways to make it easier. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop, and I will show you some slides that I've put together, and I promise you will be able to stay awake for them. All right. Let's see. Have we got everything set up? Okay. Can everyone see my slide deck, or are you seeing thumbnails and other stuff?
Nope, I'm seeing your welcome. Let's get started.
Nifty. This is great. Okay, so my first thing that I want to ask, this is a question I have of you, which is, what is your process? And what I'd like for you to do is, I walk through each of these possibilities, I'd like for you to raise your virtual hands, and maybe Sarah can help me out and say how many people have chosen this particular option, just for fun. So when you prepare an audiobook, how many people just read through it once and then jump right in and record?
Zero hands are up, Trenton.
All right. Okay, so
Miss
so we do
Tina.
have one.
Miss
That's
Tina,
good.
yeah.
Oh, and if anybody doesn't know how to raise your virtual hand in Zoom, because I know they move the feature sometimes, just let us know.
There's a
But
little reaction box at the bottom panel.
thank you. Yes, I couldn't see the box and I couldn't remember the name. Reaction box. So, how many people skim through their script, mark it all up, do your highlighting and your underlining and stuff like that, and then you just jump in and read?
No hands.
All right, we're dialing it down a little bit now. How many people just read one chapter ahead and then off you go? I'm going to read chapter 2. I'm going to record chapter 2.
No hands.
All right, now I can't wait to see if anybody says anything about this one. Does anybody speed run the book? Give me that script and I'm ready to go. My eyes can follow four lines ahead and I can just read like a narrating machine.
No, we got a lot of no's on that one.
All righty. So is there anybody who does something else? Something that isn't any combination of these A through D options?
Richard.
Oops. We got you on mute, Richard.
I do a read through and then I start outlining my characters.
Okay. Good deal. I think you'll really enjoy this then. Anybody else?
Who else has a raised hand? Let me see. Ken.
For me, it depends on what the project is. If it's a straightforward nonfiction, I'm probably going to read through it and flag anything that have issues with pronunciations or that kind of thing. If it's fiction and it's multiple characters, then I will read through it once just to enjoy it. And then I read through it again to do more analysis and start marking up characters and flagging things and making notes, things like that.
Very cool. You are on the path to full-blown prep. You've got the basics down. That's good. I will confess, there was a time I tried to do the speed run option, and I discovered that I kept hitting so many walls. I said, just sit down and read the darn thing, you idiot, and I got right to it. Lesson learned early on. But speaking of early on, what drove a lot of this is the third audiobook project that I received had over 50 distinct characters. It was about 12-ish hours long. It had passages with accents and dialects, bits in foreign languages, and it had drama. He wanted me to voice these folks and act them out. And there were technical terms, and there were lots of passages talking about orbital launch loops. So I had a lot to wrangle back then, and that's what started me down this path. So I'm going to go ahead and get into it without further ado. And thanks for your input. So here's how I prepare through my process. And the first thing I do is I do a speed bump run. My speed bump read through the book is looking for the following things. We're checking out names of characters. And I bring this up because my very first audiobook coach tells a wonderful story about how he read a book with a character named Moira, Moira. And he got to about chapter 9 when they corrected him and said, whoa, it's Mara, not Moira. And that was a whole lot of re-recording pain for him. So early on, I said, okay, I don't assume with character names unless it's very obvious, like John. I think I'm going to probably double check if I have a question. So I jot those down. I'm going to show you how I do the speed bump on our sheet in a few minutes, but first I want to walk you through it. So the next one, and I love putting this one in, is names of places. I've got places in one of my books that are in the Arctic that are written down for navigation, but no one lives there. I may have to dig to find it, but I want to try to pronounce it correctly because anybody who lives in that area or travels to that area is going to want to make sure that they feel like an authentic story, they hear it. And so my examples here are from the time I spent living in Kentucky. Kentucky does love the French because they have multiple cities named after French things and people, and yet they don't do it the same way. If you look at that first city there, you do not say it Louisville or Louisville, you say it Louisville. That's the way it's pronounced. Whether you have an accent or not, it's Louisville. That's the pronunciation. And then that one next to it, which is that beautiful palace in France from King Louis, Versailles. Well, if you're in Kentucky, it is not Versailles, especially if you're doing Appalachian accents. That is Versailles. And y'all better remember Versailles and Louisville. It's very important. That's why I write those down when I get these place names. So then there's text errors, and I know we've all had those. There are times the manuscript is a little bit off, a paragraph is duplicated, something's a little bit not quite right, and you may not notice these in the speed bump read. This is just if you happen to notice them, make a note of it. And I want to take a moment and not dig in too much into this, but I want to say when you have a text, a manuscript that is not helpful, that has multiple repeat problems, on the one hand, it is very important to let your rights holder or your publisher who you're working with, let them know you find these things and write it down. And I say that because they are going to appreciate you letting them know that you found them. But number two, don't get in the business of proofreading, correcting, rewriting, or working through the text, especially if there's a lot of them. You can do that if you want to, but make clear that this isn't something you're going to do for free on the audiobook. That is a paid service, and you want to try to charge for proofreading and for editing so that you get the most out of your time. So make that very clear with them and set that boundary. Then the next bit, accents and voice notes. I love this because as we mentioned in the introduction, I took the accents class with Jim Johnson from accenthelp.com. He gives you over, yes, he is awesome, isn't he? He is, Richard's taken it too. He gives you over 70 different language lessons that are folders with pronunciation guides, coaching examples of real people. He's traveled the world and interviewed them. And he has texts and documents. So if I have a language I'm not familiar with, I'm going to make a note of that because I'm going to need to go drill on that accent and be sure that when I'm ready, I've kind of prepped and I've got it kind of warmed up for me. Same with voice notes. When your character, just like Moira is pronounced Mara, chapters 1 through 8 need to be redone. You don't want to get into a situation where you get to chapter 8 and they say, he said in his booming tenor voice, and you're like, oh, well, I've been doing light and breezy for that guy for most of this book, and I'm going to have to go back and be a booming tenor. Authors don't always put that up front. So it's important to check for those voice notes and write them down, and I'll show you how I put that on my sheet. Then acronyms and jargon. This may seem kind of obvious, and yet the funny thing is, sometimes when I have acronym conversations with people, it can get pretty heated about who says what way. And I like to try to make sure that acronyms are put back to, if I'm working with the author, great. If the rights holder wants to do it, but I want to make sure that we touch base on that and we're in agreement. And the best example I can give you is in the military, the letters ASAP are short for as soon as possible. And depending who you talk to, ASAP is either pronounced as the letters, I want that ASAP, or it's ASAP. So you want to check, are we saying ASAP or ASAP so that you have that drilled into your head and you do it consistently throughout the book. And the last little bit I'm going to mention is technical passages. There are all sorts of times. I've talked about orbital launch loops and Vasimir engines, and my favorite author that I've worked with the most, he does hard science fiction where the science is kind of the star. So when you go on a long diatribe, you're not only going to need to slow your roll so that everybody else can hear the information that's getting thrown at them, you need to sound like you know this stuff very well, as well, maybe even better than the author. You need to sound like you love this stuff and you're passionate about it. And you need to speak to people like you are really delighted to share this with them and you believe they're smart people too. You have to work on some of these things ahead of time and maybe read the passages out loud or kind of mutter through them to get a feel so that you don't come across as patronizing. You don't fumble those tech words. If there's tech words that are like lanthanum decahydride, I'm going to need to be able to say that like I'm saying, hey, I went to Starbucks and I asked for a shot. I just drivel affogato style and also some lanthanum decahydride. And they said, great. I don't have that last thing. Can you repeat that? So you got to say it in a conversational way instead of, and I asked for some lanthanum decahydride. You get the idea. We've done this before. But it's so great when you go ahead of time and find that. And one of the reasons I don't immediately try to clear all of these up is I may find that if I find any of these elements in a particular part of the book and I'm not sure, later on, I may actually find an explanation that helps give me some insight into it. Sometimes, he said it ASAP instead of saying the letters. I wasn't used to that. Oh, okay. Well, this guy says ASAP. So let's take a moment. That's the speed bump read. Does anybody have questions about the speed bump read so far?
Anna asked a question a little while ago. Let's see, what time range should I give the RH for completion of the project when it includes pre-reading, character development, etc.?
That is a great question because that's the other part to this. I've spoken to multiple publishers about this and you're going to get different responses. But the way I do my reads, and I'm going to flip to this in a moment, is when I get my speed bump read out of the way and I'm jotting all of this down, I get the sheet filled out as quickly as possible and share that with the rights holder, author, publisher. I share that with them because while they have a chance to get that information for me, I then go through and I do my next read, which is my deep dive read. So I'm not going to give you a set time frame, but I do want to mention something about that. I'm going to come to in a moment. My deep dive read, which we'll talk to more in a moment, is the full, I'm going to get into the book and know it. So because that takes longer, use your speed bumps to fill out the sheet that I'm going to show you. Get that to your rights holder and understand a couple of things. First off, they may not have the answers. There are times you may be told, just do your best. And that's okay. You just have to kind of wing it and say, okay, this is the level of QC they want in it. The second, though, is that they may not be able to get back to you quickly. It may take them a while. So you want everybody to be taken care of. You want everybody to feel comfortable. So I like to maybe, if I think I've got a deadline that's tight on this book, I'll set a little bit of a time frame. Like maybe I spend the weekend getting the sheet ready. I send it to them Monday morning and say, hey, I've got this sheet for you, and it's got all of the questions that I have for the text. I'd like for you to try to look over them as much as possible. I'll be doing my deep dive prep work this week. If you can get to me by the close of Friday with as many of these as you can knock out, I'm going to be working on recording Friday night and through the weekend. And I would really appreciate having that information ready to go. But you can then give them a caveat and say, I realize you might not be able to get all of these right away and it may take you time. Just do your best. And then I like to share the sheet in a way where you can simultaneously edit it, which I'm going to give you a Google Sheet and an Excel. You can do either. I do the Excel with my author. He goes right in and I can see him edit. Because then what they can do is, okay, so they've knocked out the first third of it. That's fine. You now have room to record while they're figuring out the rest of the bits that we need help on. And that gives you a time to kind of stagger it a little bit. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. Well done.
All
I do
right.
I did actually ask a question because the place names pronunciation, where do you go for a reliable source for that? Was my question.
There's not one reliable source, but I actually am going to give you a sheet that I used for my previous book, and I'm going to leave some junk in there for you on purpose. And the reason I'm doing that is to show you some examples of how I go find it and also give you some links because you can use the links I've got in that sheet. What I'd suggest you do when we get to the sheet is take a copy, set it aside, pop into it and look at some of my links and some of my dialogue back and forth I've given you. Then make a copy of it and wipe all that out and name it for your title and start using that rolling forward. And that'll be your template from one book to the next. And you'll see more about that in a moment. But yes, I do multiple ways to look these things up. My favorite has typically been Wikipedia. That's my go-to because Wikipedia will show phonetic pronunciations, and there are many times you can click on that phonetic link and it will take you to a wiki that's specifically about how to say it and may have some audio. When that doesn't work, there's also a site called How'd You Say? I'll put together some links for you all if you want, where we have there should be some in the sheet, but if there's any others that you're missing, feel free to reach out to me. How'd You Say is another one where you can look it up. And then the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, online dictionaries are really good about having pronunciations, and some of them may even give you more than one of them. Then there's also YouTube. There are channels that just say the word 2 or 3 times in a row. The only disadvantage to this is that some of these places, you are going to get a bot that is going to read it, and you're going to wonder, how can I say lanthanum decahydride? So you have to take that and workshop it yourself. Build in that character's voice. Oh, he's Scottish and he's going to talk about lanthanum decahydride, so he's going to say it a little differently than Webster's website. You know, you're going to have to do a little bit of that on your own, but that gives you the building blocks. And one of the examples I've got in the sheet that I'm going to show you is from translate.google.com. That's another thing you can do. If it's in another language, then chances are you can go in and specify what language it's in and use that to get a kind of often robotic, sometimes a little more human pronunciation, and use that as your building blocks to build out how you would say it as that character. All right. Any more questions before we move on to deep dive in the sheet?
Somebody else, Andrew also said Youglish.com.
Youglish. Oh, I'm going to write that one down.
I use
Cool.
Youglish all the time as well. It's particularly good for people's names. If you want to hear somebody say their own name, sometimes you can find it. And that's the best authority on how to say somebody's name if they say it themselves.
Oh, that reminds me. Thank you, Ken. That reminds me, another thing you can look for is baby names. If you have a character who has an unusual name, go to websites for baby names. They'll often tell you how to pronounce it when you're trying to figure out a name for your baby. Well, this baby may be 50 years old and a grizzled veteran of combat, but by God, you can find his pronunciation. The blessed event of the birth of my audiobook is thanks to babynames.com. All right, so I'm going to talk about the deep dive, which is, this is the part where you get to have fun and you get to know the book and you're reading it properly. Some people may need to mark it up as they go at this point. That's fine. You know, if you're at the point where you want to do your prep and your speed bump read and you're getting all the stuff down, but now here's the part where you're saying, okay, I want to put a dramatic emphasis. I know people who do little ballpoint pen marks, or they use a stylus, or they use highlighters, whatever your method. I don't have to worry about that, but to each their own. So you can insert that here if that's what you want. But the goal is you need to read this text and you need to be asking yourself, who's involved in this particular part? What's happening in this particular part? How's everybody reacting to it? Are they frightened? Are they angry? Something's going to change with your character arc when you go through the deep dive from the beginning through the end. You know where they're going to arrive, and you know that journey is going to go through these different scenes. Really dig into these scenes and think about the acting part of it. Even if you don't do distinct character voices, be thinking about what's happening in the text and how that affects the character on their progression, because your listeners are going to hear that in your performance. Which brings me to the last bit. How is the narrator reacting? We all know when we narrate the text that we need to take a fairly neutral tone and steady pace. And we need to slow our damn roll so that people don't lean forward to catch up. Because if they're impatient, they can always speed it up. But it's much harder for them to slow the roll of their audible title. The point being, though, narrators do react to some small degree. That doesn't mean that a chase scene you're going to start reading faster and oh my goodness. But when the action changes pace a little, you want to think about that too, because the narrator is kind of a character reacting. Narrating a fist fight and a funeral are not going to be the same animal. So that's what my deep dive does. It helps me really understand the text and who's doing what and everything about it. Any questions on the deep dive? All right.
And if you guys do have questions, when he says, do you have questions, please just unmute yourself and ask away, okay?
The only reason I'm not popping into the chat is I'm not always sure if that's going to pop up over the screen or cause my screen to flip windows. So I'm trying to keep the slides up and happy.
Yeah, I'm monitoring the chat, but it shouldn't do that to you, I wouldn't think. But
cool.
Anyway.
So once I do the speed bumps and the deep dive, I'm ready to record, and that's when I go in and I do it. But there is one optional thing that I just mentioned earlier when I talked about passages that are technical, or if I've got a lot of characters and voices going on. Depending on how you like to read, you may want to do a little pre-chapter prep. You're really familiar with the text, but you also know there's going to be 4 different people talking. One of them gets angry. I got to do an argument, and he starts shouting in Russian. So I'm going to kind of need to get those Russian phrases to where they roll off my tongue. So you may do a little bit where you go in and you practice the scene a little bit. Sometimes if I'm recording along and I know the complicated part comes up, I record and then I pause right there and I practice a little bit. And then I go back to recording and I roll through it after I've done a couple of unrecorded takes to make sure it really feels right, and I keep moving. So that's one thing you can also do. And without further ado, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to walk you through the sheet. So I will use the Excel version here, and I've got 3 different tabs. The first tab here is my read questions. And the way I go through the book is as I'm going through the manuscript, I jot my questions down here. So I make sure that my rights holder knows what chapter, what page, save them the trouble and give them what section. The goal of this sheet is for me to get answers, but the best way for me to get answers is to make it as easy as possible for them to get those answers. And I'm going to give you examples in a moment. So then I have my question and I have the answer. And to be honest with you, once I do my speed bump read, I will go through and see how many of these I can answer myself first. And then when I hand it to the rights holder, I will highlight in yellow the ones that I need for them to answer for me. Or I'll say, please answer the blank ones, or please answer 1 through 40. But typically, I will highlight and say, I just need your input on these. So that also makes it much easier. And yes, somebody has a question? I see a hand raised. Gudrun Bruno?
Gudrun, did you have a question? No? Okay.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Meantime, so I'm going to give you a couple quick examples, and I promise these are brief. Some of these are simple, like my author just happens to be the person who lived in the Navy and he knows all of these acronyms, so I'm going to go to him because in this particular project, the author has hired me to do the voice, and then he wants me to work with the publisher who is going to lay in sound effects. And I know we all have different opinions on sound effects. I'm mentioning this because this guy, with the life he's lived, he was a sound guy on a submarine. So this submarine-based adventure, he gives the publisher recordings of a Russian sub's dive alarm, of a Chinese certain class sub's surfacing alarm. He has all of these sounds, and it adds a lot of magic for people who are really into submarines, and everybody else goes, wow, this adds some flavor. So he knows the acronyms. And that's why in this example that I'm focusing on, BUPERS, I'm like, do I say boopers or do I pronounce the acronym? Do I say the Bureau of Personnel? Because my listeners aren't all going to know the acronyms. And he says, you know what? It's actually BUPERS. Okay, great. One of the things that I also will do is sometimes I will say, okay, do I say the full acronym the first time and then go ahead and just say it abbreviated afterwards? And this example is Commander Submarine Force Pacific. Throughout all of it, we say ComSubPac. Great. So now I'm going to give you the most complicated option I had. Sometimes you'll get a book that has footnotes and you'll want to figure out how to incorporate them. For the most part, it's typical to ignore footnotes, but sometimes a footnote is important to the text and you want to ask that question. And I'm going to give you this picture-perfect example. But before I do, I want to show you that what I did to make it easier for that person to make a decision is I said, okay, here's what I see are the 3 possible options that'll work. Pick one. That's so much easier than saying, what do you want me to do about this footnote? It's a footnote. I don't know. Just think about it and give them options. So I'm going to show you real quick in the text. Where did we go? Page 31. There we go. Okay. So on this script, I have marked this up, so you'll see little marks here. The original text just said, the guy's asking our character, is this going to impact your critical thinking when you're EOW at 500 feet and something goes wrong? Listeners aren't going to get it. They're going to hear EOW and they're not going to know what to do with it. Well, EOW is the engineering officer of the watch. And if we're a reader, our eyes can flick down here and go, oh, engineering officer of the watch. They're in charge of nuclear plant and propulsion systems. Okay, got it. We're good. But then I thought, okay, this guy, the way this exchange goes is he's trying to nail Mac to the wall. He's trying to really come at him and startle him and back him into a corner. So there's some drama here and I have some leeway. So I said, okay, what if we do it this way? And one of the options I gave him is I said, is this going to impact your critical thinking when you're engineering officer of the watch in charge of the nuclear plant and propulsion systems on Toothus at 500 feet and something goes wrong? Ta-da! He loved it. This was the way to add that in. So you can do little things like that. It works perfectly because if you look here, the character's supposed to react with shock. This is a slap in the face to him. So he says a bad word. So you get the idea. You can do that. I don't want you to get down in the weeds and feel like you have to do this with every detail. I'm showing you some options. And sometimes when you look over something, you can say, okay, the listener's going to get lost if I say, what if you're EOW at 500 feet and something goes wrong? They're going to go, I don't know what that means. So let's take a moment and fix it. So there's my example with that footnote. And then later on, let me see if I have another one here for you. I have a couple of other things like Lieutenant JG. Every time I see that in the text, I now say Lieutenant Junior Grade because JG just doesn't sound right. And I do have some other links here for example, Merriam-Webster's dictionary site for Bellingshausen Sea. But the gist of it is, these are the read questions that I write through. And here's one other thing you can consider to mark up your text if you use Microsoft Word. I added one other method where if you look at this text, when I come in here and I have something that I see as a speed bump, I immediately tagged it and made a comment. And my comment was what I needed to know, and I copied it into the sheet. And when I got my answer, I put my answer here. So that way, as I'm going through here while I'm reading the text, my eyes can flip over to the margin here and know, okay, yeah, I remember. Now we're going to say ComSubPac. And that can help me out as I go through the text. Let me see if I can find another good example here for you. Well, it's a little while. Here we go. So as you can see, I can put comments in and I can put my answer if I need to. Like if any change to this text needed to be made, I'll go ahead and change my copy of the manuscript to match what I need to read, but maybe every once in a while I need to remind myself. There's one I did down here that was, it's on the pronunciation sheet, that I had to put comments in to remind me to say it correctly because I said it wrong about 8 times in a row and I just couldn't get my brain out of that habit. So I just said, okay, copy paste that comment every time I see it. And now as I'm going through the script, my little helper me from time traveling back in the past when we were doing the speed bump read is hanging out over my shoulder going, oh, you need to say Atoka, not Ataka. Or no, it was, you need to say Pataka. Don't say Patoka. I know there's that O in the middle, but remember, we agreed on this. Pataka. So I'm going to get to that in a moment, the pronunciations. Yeah.
Trenton, Gudrun, do you want to unmute now and ask the question that you had a minute ago? Let's see, I'll ask to unmute. He's having a hard time with the
Oh, okay.
mute, unmute.
It happens. That's part of why I'm a little tentative about fiddling with the UI too much, but yeah. Gudrun, if it would help, you can type it in the chat. I'll pop up the chat since that doesn't seem to interfere.
Okay, we can just keep moving on.
We'll keep moving. I'm going to stick around here, though we have plenty of time.
Okay.
So we're good. And I want to make sure I address your question. In the meantime, this is my read questions. The next is my character notes, much simpler. So I know, for example, that Colonel Harold Brisbane is crisply British. I also know that if he's British, he's not going to say his name Brisbane. I'm an American. I do that. Yanks say things differently. It might be Brisbane. But I also have other things like this guy has a Texas drawl and he likes wearing his cowboy hat on the bridge. So he really leans into his Texan, y'all. That's all I got to say. So I can keep those in mind. And it helps me make it easier to remember my character notes. And maybe the first time that character shows up, I do that. But I'm also going to show you how I organize all those character voices in a minute, too. Let's skip past character notes to pronunciations, and then I'll take more questions. Whenever I'm doing my speed bump read, and I find something that maybe is a pronunciation like eow, I'm going to throw it in here, and I'm going to give myself a pronunciation, whatever works for me. Some people are really good at reading the IPA language, the phonetics, International Phonetics Alphabet. If you're not as good at that, that's okay. You can do like I do and just put Cobb in quotes. Or Camaroceros. I need to be able to roll that off the tongue like I have one in my home. It's actually a prehistoric gigantic squid creature that lived in a massive conical shell body. So I probably shouldn't have one in my home, but I need to be able to say it like I know it. And I put the meaning here because there are going to be times that's going to inform my read. So like the 1MC, whenever I see that on the text, that's the internal ship's communications. If the officer is standing on the bridge and he says, prepare to dive, that's going to be very different than if he says to the 1MC, prepare to dive, because now he's on the comms and he's giving a very clear order across the whole of the sub. So that's an example of that. I've also got some other bits in here like fortaleza, blade of the tongue R. These are notes for me because of how I pronounce, whatever works for you. And I've got links. And I'm going to scoot down a little bit to probably the more important bits. I have some foreign languages bits. And so I go to Google Translate because I had to say the name of this submarine again and again and again. And thankfully, this submarine's name, I could copy and paste it into Google Translate and say, this is Chinese, and it would tell me exactly what it needed to be. And then I can write down what looks like a god-awful Texas train wreck of a sentence, you shon and know that that's Xineng Yusheng And so if I'm American, I'm going to say the Xineng Yusheng But if I'm one of the Chinese characters, I might say the Xineng Yusheng So that's how I do that with Google Translate. Just give you a quick example. Desktop audio is a little bit iffy, so I'm not going to bother trying to click it, but I'm just going to tell you. My, we are slow. I'm going to tell you, it will show you the translation. And the fun thing is, for some of these, Asian languages do have some overlap, just like American English has all sorts of rules that don't necessarily apply. You may sometimes have a character that shifts a little bit. Like some of these, there was Taiwanese and there was explicitly Chinese simplified. So you can do that. So I get a little bit of a pronunciation, and I can talk next to it and say it again and again until I have it, and then I can write down the phonetics for it, and that helps me get the pronunciation down pat. Okay, so that is my sheet. That is the 3 different phases of it: your questions from the read, your character notes, and then any pronunciations. Does anyone have questions at this point?
Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Ask your questions.
That's right, y'all.
I typed in my questions in the chat.
Okie dokie. Let's take a look.
Okay. However, I'm visually impaired and can't see your Excel sheet. When you say 3 tabs, are there 3 sheets?
Oh,
Do you have columns with, for instance? Okay, so can you kind of describe your sheet and what's on it? That's great.
I would be happy to. And in fact, let me also do a little bit of a zoom, just long enough to give us the ability to see. So I'm going to go, my first sheet is called, there's 3 sheets in the workbook. If I'm going to get Microsoft technical on you, an Excel
Well,
spreadsheet is technically a workbook of spreadsheets. So
I
we got
like that, please.
cool. Yes, so we got 3 sheets in one book.
Mhm.
And the first sheet is named Read Questions. And on the bottom left corner, I actually have labeled that tab Read Questions. Now across the top, the columns I have are the chapter, the page in the manuscript, the section on that page, and for example, it might say paragraphs 3 and 4. And then my question. My question could be something like, do I say ComSub Pac or Commander Submarine Force Pacific? But then to give you the example I mentioned earlier where I gave options on how to say the text, I did put a bunch of writing in that field, and it says 3 options that let us insert footnote 6. Option A, and it was the long bit that I read out that was dramatic. Option B, just say EOW and continue. Option C, instead of saying EOW, say Engineering Officer of the Watch, so the listener knows, and that's an example. That is the first sheet in the workbook. Any questions?
Oh, that's beautiful. That's poetry.
Yay! I love to hear that. I am so happy. That is awesome. Okay, so my second one is even easier. My second one is named Character Notes, and you'll also see it on the bottom of the screen. I think it also does the same in the Google Sheet. I'm going to give you both. You can use either one, whichever you're comfortable with. You can share an Excel spreadsheet if you store it in the cloud. It's easiest if you're in Microsoft OneDrive because it's a Microsoft product, but you can share the spreadsheet in the cloud, and then your rights holder or author can go in and edit it in real time, and the 2 of you can sit there and work back and forth. Google Sheets also does this, so there are ways to do that. In the meantime, though, to come back to my character notes sheet, I simply have the name and the notes. And so the name, Lieutenant Heather Wells, William Akins. The notes are anything I copy paste out of the text, like his voice had a medium timbre that I sensed could cut through any noise level should he choose. Well, now I know I need to be a medium timbre and use a little bit of my stage voice when I speak because he could cut through any noise level should he choose. So then pronunciations, that is the 3rd tab across the bottom. And I have first the term that I'm trying to pronounce. And that could be, here's an example. One of them just says submarine coordinates. And then in the column for pronunciation, whatever's going to help me say it right. If I'm noting in an IPA or I have a link or whatever. And so submarine coordinates, I put a note in here. All coordinates are spoken numbers. For example, 180 is pronounced 180. Set a course bearing 180. And decimal is never point. It is pronounced decimal, except in casual conversation. If he says 180.5, no, he says set a course for 180.5. Now I know. And the last bit that I mentioned earlier for this sheet is after I do the pronunciation column, The third column is the meaning, and a link if that would be helpful. But the meaning helps me because when I'm going through the text, I should probably keep in mind what that is. And that's why it's easier to have that meaning in mind when I'm looking through it. Even when I'm just skimming over it, it's a visual reminder. Oh yeah, we call it doc, but it's dive operations control. And then just because I like to be generic, I have another column called other notes in case there was anything else. And in one case, my author actually came back and said, I tried to reflect the conversational pieces in the text, but do stick to the technical. Okay, there you go. How'd I do?
You did great.
Awesome. Thank you. And I am going to be around for any follow-up questions after this, but let's get as many as we have. Does anybody have any other questions about the sheet? All right. In that case, I'm going to take another step here forward, and I'm back on my slides. So now I'm going to talk about the files, especially when you have a lot of characters. There's a couple of things about file sharing that I'll share with you when you organize your files that's going to make your life a little bit easier. So now I'm going to show you this last book that I did, which is pretty complex. And I am going to try to, I happen to be pretty good at my Windows keyboard here. Let's see if I can, yes, I can zoom in and make this a little bigger. But the gist of this is, let me make it into I do need to bring it to a list layout. Let's do that real quick. View, list. Okay. So it's not important to read what these say. It's just important to know how I've structured it. I have a folder for my project where I mentioned earlier this project, I'm sending the files to the author to review and make sure the text is correct. And then when the author approves it and says, we're good, and he gives his stamp, I send those to the publisher because the publisher is going to do further production. I'm giving them production-ready audio, and they're putting in sound effects. So for that back and forth, I have a folder for my author. And anytime I finish a chapter, my finished production file goes in my audiobook folder in a nice neat row, and I put a copy in the folder for my author, and then I send him an email and remind him, okay, chapter 2 has just been recorded. It's available for your review in your folder at your convenience. And I give him the link. This is a little different because I know there's some folks here that will record the entire audiobook and hand that over, and that's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. But I want to make sure you know, because I've talked to many publishers about this, they don't have a problem with you giving them something ahead of time, especially if it's something they're going to have to do some work on before it's ready for market. So for me, the cadence I have is I will deliver my chapter when it's done to the rights holder, and the rights holder has the opportunity to review it, and I actually use a sheet for them to mark down pickups that's separate from the sheet we talked about so that they can tell me if anything's wrong with the text. I use those pickups to revise it and give them a revised copy. And once we're good and we agree, and I don't do more than 1 or 2 revisions, but once we're happy with everything and we call it good, in this case, because I've got 2 other parties, I take the author's copy that he says is good and I put it in the rights holders folder and I let them know chapter 2 is signed off and good to go. Any questions about that process?
Unmute yourself if you do.
And I'll also check the chat, I promise.
So I kind of worry about that. My author was like, "Oh, you can upload each chapter as you get them done," and I keep thinking, "Good Lord! I mean, I would never get done if she's like sending me back constant revisions as I'm trying to record." So, is there a way to make it more time efficient somehow?
There's 2 things regarding this. The first is when I get a chapter done and hand it to them and they review it, I then move on to the other chapters and don't worry about it and hope that we don't have a pickup that trails across more than 1 chapter. But the other piece of that is you need to make very clear, and you can do this in your welcome packet. I don't know if you have one of those, but you can set up some guidelines at the beginning that say, look, the things that you're listening for, you're my second set of ears. That's the phrase I like to use. You're my second set of ears. and you're going to find any mistakes in the text. Did I say something wrong, or did I miss a sentence, or is something not right? What you're not going to do is you're not going to correct my performance. You're not going to say, I don't think they sounded angry enough in that bit. It's my position as someone who has been trained in this style and knows your listeners and knows this market to put the performance together that your book deserves. So your notes to me are things like, oh, you said Patoka again. Say Pataka. Does that help?
Yeah, because I think about that a lot. It's like I'm proofing my own stuff, so I'm going through and I'm finding a lot of errors in the text, of course. So I'm correcting it as I go, and she's aware of the errors. But it's like I just keep thinking, will it make it take even longer if I allow the constant? She gets 2 revisions for the whole thing on ACX. This is an ACX thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'd rather just give her, the whole thing to her at once and then have it done. And then she can just like kick it back to me. But I don't know. I'm new. What do I know?
Well, no, it's a good point, because there are a lot of people in the industry, and I've had a couple of them tell me this is their hill to die on. The way I read the contract, you give them the whole thing. You have no choice.
Right, right.
Most are going to like having something ahead of time to work on, because it's going to help if you've got a producer who's doing work like sound effects. It's going to save them time. If your author hears that, they feel a little of that magic and they get a little more excited because they can hear the work in progress. And the progression of it is going to help coach them as well. And the last bit is, yeah, I'm human. I do really well reading. I record stuff. And then there are times when I'm going back through the recording and double checking. I actually listen through mine just to see if I missed anything, and I'll find a couple things here and there. And I
Yeah.
still might have my rights holder find a mistake because I'm a human.
Well, and there's some things I've seen in the book I'm working on. It's like the stuff that the book itself says, the text says, is incorrect, like grammatically incorrect. She told me she was having trouble with whatever word processing program she was working with. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like a lot of ins became ons and a lot of intos or ontos and that kind of thing. So I'm reading them how they should be. So hopefully, and she'd asked if I could, help like correct the stuff. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not being paid for this. There's so many errors. So I don't know what
Exactly.
to do, It's like just do the best I can and hope that she'll roll with it. I don't know.
Well, you can put that option to them. You can say, look, there are a lot of problems with the text, so we have a couple of options. And someone has actually just asked in the chat, who was that? Yeah, Terrell and Carol also asked about my welcome package. I'd be happy to share that with you.
Ooh,
Yes.
yes,
So
please.
along those lines, because that comes back to this, is that you help them get the expectation that they need to be working with you because you're human. But at the same time, you also kind of make them feel comfortable because you've now given them a plan and a path to communication. It is difficult because you don't want to critique, but when you have a bad text, that's one of the things you also may want to say in the welcome packet. Please give me the final version of the manuscript. And the other bit, when you get to this point, like I said, you can make them an offer. You can say, look, this is really not workable. I really want us to have a quality product. And I realize that even sometimes it looks okay to your eyes, but when a voice reads it and ears hear it, they're going to have a different experience. Let's do this. Either we delay the project while you work on the manuscript, or I will revise your manuscript for you and do the review process. Here are my rates.
Ooh, that's a great idea. Because I know she was, she's an experienced writer. She's not a new writer, and she's a publisher of a magazine and all this stuff. And it's an outstanding manuscript. It's really well written, but whatever program she's using has really kind of screwed it up. So it's like, I don't know how much leeway I have to say, what do I do? I don't know. I'm too new. I don't know.
Well, you just think of the goals. I want to take care of these people, but I don't want to do their work for them. I know where
Right.
my responsibility ends and theirs begins, and their responsibility is to deliver me a workable manuscript or work with me if there's a few little egregious things and that's it. But
Mm-hmm.
if this is habitual throughout the text, you need to set some other agreement or you need to even be willing to walk away. My
Yeah.
second audiobook project was difficult for me because I actually had to walk away and say, I'm not doing this because I couldn't get them to stop revising pronunciations. And
Yikes.
I'll mention that on the topic of accents. It is understood that just like an American actor taking the stage to do Shakespeare, you're giving a performance. You're not going to sound fluent like a native in every single country on the planet. So sometimes you have to tell people, look, I'm going to do my best. It may not be perfect. It definitely won't be native. But
Yeah.
we're going to do our best here. So those are the kinds of things you set as an expectation.
Well, it makes good sense. And it's just so frightening, getting into the first, I cried when I got the offers. It's like, oh my God, I finally got one. Yay.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh my goodness. Okay. So now we're down to the brass tacks. And I started making notes of the errors as I was going. It's like, holy cow, there's 45 chapters. It's almost 500 pages. It's like, I can't, I just can't. I'm not, it's too much. I need to get the stuff done and,
Yeah.
try to make it as good as possible for both of us. It's
You
really
have
kind
the
of
right
overwhelming.
goals though, and that's the point. So I will say, and I say this because I've heard publishers say this before as well. I love authors, I love publishers, I love working with all of these people, rights
Yeah.
holders of all kinds. But at a certain point, you need to understand that as the narrator, you are coming at them from a position of strength. You are providing a talent that they need. And I don't say this in a way to drive a hard bargain, but I say it in a way of setting yourself up as that voice of authority. You need to believe in yourself. It can be a
Cool.
little difficult. We all get imposter syndrome when we're alone in our room and recording quietly to ourselves. But you need to be able to believe that you have the skills and you're there for a reason. And as long as your goal is to take care of them, but have boundaries, you just keep that in mind and don't let it beat you up too much. There may be times you have to get rid of a client and you have to say
Yeah.
no, and that's okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
You are welcome. I don't want to spend too much time on that because I want to do a couple more things. I want to show you real quick my character files, and then I will actually, if you want, I'll share a pickup sheet with you, and I will share you my welcome packet if you're curious. But let's take a moment. I want to show you the character files because this project has been perfect for me to give as a demo for you all. This is the fourth book in a series. Some of these military guys have been around since book one. So every book I do, when I create a file of their voice for reference for me, I can then put it in here for the next book. And whenever they get promoted, I get to write up their new position. Oh, he's an admiral now. So now I rename the file for the admiral name. And I also get the ability to say, oh, if I just happen to hear in the beginning, oh, yeah, so and so, he got transferred somewhere else. Yeah. Or, well, he passed away. Okay, well, then we can just delete his character file, and that's one less wave file for me to worry about. So let me explain what you're seeing here. You are seeing a folder full of wave files that's called character files. And the reason I set this in a separate folder is I don't want one big folder that's a kitchen sink train wreck mess of all files. I have nice, neat chapter files named in a way that sort themselves in my main folder. In my character files folder, I have all the character names. And because this military, everybody has a title, I have named my files Adjutant William Akins, Captain Dan Richardson. But the other thing I do, because these guys are military and they have nicknames, so Chief Torpedoman Cedric is nicknamed Tubes. So I put their nickname in all caps because they're sometimes going to refer to each other as, hey, Masters. And I'm like, who's Masters? Oh, it's Ronald. It's Captain Ronald, not Captain Ron. Captain Ronald, Ronald Masters. So now I know whenever I hear someone say, hey, Boston, what's the reading on the depth on that? Oh, he's talking about the chief of the boat, the Master Chief Torpedoman Jerry Boston. There you go. So if I see him referred to as the torpedo man on duty, or I see someone say, "Hey, Jer," I go looking. And the reason I'm telling you that is then this is over 50 files. This includes people like the bartender at the Breakers Bar. So if I need to search for it, I just use my little explorer. And if you're on Apple, of course, you'll use the Finder search or Spotlight, whatever you prefer. But see these little, I do a wildcard. So like if I need to find Colonel Brisbane, I'm going to do a little wildcard and then Briz star dot star. So I just kind of do variables, and when I press enter, it's going to show me the only file I have that has those letters in it. So now I can quickly right click that, play that a few times in my head with a media player and go, okay, yes, I'm speaking as Harold Brisbane. Harold Brisbane. Yes, he's crisply British. So that's how I very quickly pop in. And there may be times when I'm recording, I'm like, uh-oh, I'm about to be Harold. I'm going to pause it. Let me pop in here, search, listen, Harold. Yes, I'm speaking as Harold now. I'm ready to deliver his line. Unpause recording. Say my line. Pause again. Move on. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, so now I'm going to close my character file results, and I'll take a moment here. So the gist of it is create little wave files. Every time a character shows up in a chapter, grab the snippet of you reading their lines and just export it as a wave. And the reason I say wave is it's still kind of small. It is lossless, which means that when you try to open it in a player, it's going to pop right up. If you have an MP3, that file is compressed. And there's going to be a little bit of a delay playing that back in a player again and again, just because when it first opens it in the player, it has to decompress it. So this is just a little maneuver that saves me a little bit of extra time by making wave files. They're fast. Okay, so the last thing I'll mention on the file organization, and we're almost done here, is that, let me pop back in my folder. The way I've numbered these files, I name the file starting with the number so that they all sort themselves up nice and neat. And I like to name chapter 1 01 underscore chapter 1. So when I do 01 at the beginning and 02, 03, 04, it lines up nice and neat. And the beauty of that is, if I were to just do 1, 2, 3 and not 01, 02, 03, when I get to 09 and 10 and 11, computers are stupid. They don't think like we do. They make some dumb mistakes. And in this case, they just look at numbers as a series. So if they count, they see 0, 1, 11, 2, or let's see, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on, 19, 2, 20, 21. So when you do the 0 for the first 9 of them, it lines it up nice and neat. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then 10, 11, 12, so on. And so then I have it bookended a bit. Before the book, this one just happens to have a foreword and a disclaimer and a prologue. You don't always read those, but I read these. So I simply had to name them with different zeros. So the 000 is at the top. 00 is right after. I'm not going to get in the weeds on this, but you get the idea. You create names so it sorts itself so that you know what order it needs to go in when you go to upload it to ACX or give it to your rights holder. And that gives me the ability to make a quadruple 0 for my opening credits and a 99 for my closing credits. And I know somewhere in between those, I have chapters 1 through 98. Any questions on that? I see the chat. Oh, cool.
We're just giving you accolades in the chat. Don't pay any attention to that.
Thank you so much. I love to hear that because I feel like once I had the light bulb moment, I'm like, other people could benefit from this and
No
we could all
kidding.
be faster. Yes. Oh, Jim Dale. I don't know how he did that. I love the fact that he did so many voices, but I never really looked into his technique or his methods. I have some time though, so I'll show you my pickup sheet. Before I do, I want to take a moment and talk about your files real quick. One more thing about files. When you use a file sync service like Dropbox, OneDrive, iCloud, Google Drive, when you have a local folder on your hard drive that is synced up to the cloud, it's a great system to keep backups. And that's why I put my final files in there, because if for some reason my production computer barfs, if I'm lucky, it got synced up to the cloud first and I can go to any other computer, pull it down, and we're good. I actually used to do this because I would record in my closet and I would produce in a building that was detached from my house. So I'd finish my recording, I'd export a file, then I'd go downstairs, go outside, sit down at my computer. And by the time I got there, it was synced up and ready to go. It's kind of neat. But what you don't want to do is don't record in a folder that is synced to the cloud, because your recording tool, Isotope, Audacity, Studio One, while it's recording, it's using that folder to read write. It may be using that folder to read write temp files. Audacity will definitely do this. And if it's trying to create and dispose of temp files to keep itself recording smoothly for you, and the cloud synced folder thinks anytime you put something in that folder, I need to immediately put it to the cloud, and when you remove it, I need to take it out, it creates a lot of thrashing back and forth where that cloud folder is trying to keep up with what your audio software is doing and sync everything up and down, and everything grinds to a halt while your disk goes crazy trying to handle all of that. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions about that one? It's kind of weird.
No questions?
All right.
Okay. You're
I
doing
wanted to make
great.
sure, because I used to do this and I started getting errors. And so I realized, okay, have a place on my hard drive that's my working folder and it's not cloud synced to anything. Then wherever I'm going to use to share to the cloud, just dump that MP3 to that, or dump that WAV file to that, whatever I'm doing. Just don't work inside of a cloud synced folder. All right. Cool. Yes, I bought 2 external hard drives to store things as well as to the cloud. Yes. David H. Lawrence the 17th has talked to me before about how he has 4 copies. And he has, like, I think, one in a vault in his house, one in a safety deposit box, one in his car, and one in his studio. And he just rotates. I don't go that far. But yes, external hard drives are a great idea. I actually have a system like that too. Whenever I get done with a project, I have a file server and I just archive the outputted finished files. I don't save any temp files or other things, and all of my assets there. And it tidies up my cloud storage, because then if I need it, well, I can reload it in the cloud. But if we're not working on that book anymore because it's done and it's off to market, there's no point taking up space. All right, and Richard has a friend who owns and operates a cloud sync service in the UK. That's awesome. There are a lot you can choose from, and the principle is simple. I need to put it in a place where someone else can get it, and you don't have to do that if you're using ACX. There are times my rights holder wants me to upload it to ACX and then upload a new one. But the luxury I get when I use my own folder, especially when I've got this 3-way relationship where author approves it, then producer gets a copy, is when I upload these files into this folder, this particular author said, you know what? I want you to make separate files for the revisions, so I know I'm getting the latest and greatest and we don't have any sync problems. So I named the next file Chapter 15 Rev 2, Chapter 15 Rev 3. We've never had to go beyond Rev 3. I would not do that for anybody that wasn't a client who I felt was, worth the extra effort. But so far, Rev 2, Rev 3, then they can go, okay, now I know that I'm reviewing the last revision. And once they're happy with it, I say, okay, if you're happy with that, well, I just so happen to have made a copy of that version that isn't named Rev 2. And now I'm going to copy paste it into the folder for my producer so that he's not going to get confused and say, why do I have Rev 2s and Rev 3s? But my rule is producer guy never gets anything unless it's done. That way, producer guy doesn't hear me say, oh, wait, stop. If you were working on that, just stop, because maybe I got to go fix I got to do a revision. The final version is when all the pickups are done. And just for the heck of it, I'll go ahead and show you my pickup sheet for this book. And I'd be happy to share that with you too. Give me just a moment here. So this is what I do for pickups. I have the basic columns of, I just number them 1 through 12. So if we're in a conversation and the rights holder says, Yeah, I need you to fix pickup number 12. It wasn't quite right, and I had to adjust it again. With the pickups, because they're listening to the audio file, I have just a number system of 1 through 20, whatever. I then have a column for the chapter. What chapter is this pickup in? Because if they have 2 or 3 more that they're reviewing that day because they didn't get to them, I'm going to need to know which one they're talking about. Then I have the time. What time signature in the chapter? Well, it's at 9 minutes and 49 seconds. Okay, what page is it in the manuscript? I got to admit, most of my rights holders don't fill in the page for me. I can jot it down if I want to, but usually I'm ending up having to kind of flip through my manuscript to figure out where it is at 9 minutes and 49 seconds. But here's an example. So I say, okay, pickup number, chapter it's in, time it's in the file, page in the manuscript would be nice. What is the problem? And what's the solution? That's it. What's the error? What's the correction? So, you read doc? I needed you to pronounce each letter D-O-C. Okay. So then on the very far left, I have a little column here that I mark an X that it's done. That way I know, okay, I knocked that one out. And while I'm doing all my pickups and then I get them done, I export the files, put my MP3 in the folder for my author, and I say, hey, just wanted you to know the latest version is up there for your review. It's a Rev 2 of chapter 15. And that's how I use the pickup sheet. And as you can see, here's my embarrassing moment where I couldn't stop saying Pataka, and my brain really believed I was saying Patoka. Yeah. Any questions on that?
I like the way you're like, yeah.
Pataka. I'm not even sure. Yeah, with the ah in the second. Yeah, so Pataka. I kept saying Patoka. Why? I could see the A right there, and my brain was saying, oh, that's an A. Let's say it is an O.
Anybody have
All
any
right.
questions really quickly? I know he's on this pickup form, and then he's going to talk about the welcome packet. It looks like
Yep.
we have about 15 minutes left or so to go. So if anybody has a question before he moves on, now's the time to don't be shy.
I did make a pretty question slide, and I'm very proud of it.
It's beautiful. I'm really impressed with your presentation.
Thank you. And I see Gudrun may have a new hand raise.
Yep.
Okay.
Unmute.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yep.
okay,
Yes.
you can. Yeah, I came in a bit late. So you said slow down your roll. Do you mean slow down your reading?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I apologize. That's a little bit of it's a technical term for your read. Slow
no,
your
that's-
roll is the same thing as slowing down the read.
And my another question, how can I download all this great stuff?
I will make sure Rhonda Phillips can send it to you. And Rhonda, I will bundle it up for you by the morning because I have a couple goodies that I've added here. I've already given Rhonda a link to the Google Sheet, and you want to make a copy of that for yourself so that you don't work directly in the one copy that we're all sharing. We just take it
Right.
and make a copy, save a copy, and it'll put it somewhere in your Google Drive. And you can use that copy to refer to, and you can wipe out anything I have in that sheet and make a nice blank copy that you then reuse for every project. So
Yeah,
I think
that's-
you'll see the name of the title has something like title name. So for
Right.
Operation Whiteout, I rename the thing prep sheet for Operation Whiteout.
But if I don't really have a Google Drive yet, so can I
Okay.
download it to my computer and have it somewhere somehow?
You absolutely can. I'm going to give you an Excel file you can download,
Yeah.
a Google Drive file you can use.
Okay.
You can use any file storage. If you have a Windows computer, then you already have OneDrive built in with a small amount of storage that you can use if you wanted to.
Okay.
Office is actually a pretty good deal. I'm not trying to sell Microsoft products, but
No,
I
but I
pay
have
about $100 a year for up to
Yeah.
25 installs and a terabyte of space.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. No, I think this is one of the most useful things I'm so impressed.
Yay! I am glad to hear
Yay.
it.
So what I'll do, you guys, is when I send the replay link tomorrow, I will send you the Google Drive, the Excel download, and Trenton has given me a plethora of other links to share with you. So just make sure you look for that email. That'll have all the links that you need.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah, as a bonus, I did a YouTube video where I had to take 3 different audiobooks I'd done as a trilogy, and now I needed to make a bundle. And the bundle required me to touch every audio file. So I came up with a system to organize doing all of this, getting all my files together, and making it easy for me to go through. And that YouTube video is up there for you to watch if you want to learn that. That's one of the things we'll share.
You're amazing, Trenton.
Thank you.
You're the most organized person I've ever met. But then
I
again, we
just-
talked about that we couldn't share a space because of my ADHD and your extreme organization. We would be a hot mess in the same room.
Okay, give me just a second here. I do have a direct message. Give me a second here.
Everybody's saying their heads are exploding.
And I will be sharing my my email. I think we'll have here, as well as the links to my YouTube channel and other stuff like that.
Mhm.
And let's see, I did promise you I would show you my welcome packet. I'm honestly a little bit, when it comes to organization, my latest and greatest welcome packet is kind of a new idea. I used to have so much kind of nice informal ad hoc conversations that then quickly rolled into sheets, and the sheets made everything clear for everybody. But then I realized that as I go and land new clients, some of them are going to want to feel a little bit better about their choice and understand how we work. And I encourage them to take the time to read it. And although it's way beyond the scope of tonight, I do have little methods, and maybe I should make a video for this, for very quickly putting together a good Word document. There are a lot of tools inside of Microsoft that make it easy for you to throw something together that looks like you had a publisher do it. And I think my audio probably went choppy while that file was loading, didn't it?
No, it was good.
Okay, good. All right, I'm going to zoom out just a bit here because you don't need to be able to read it. I'm just going to walk you through the layout. There's my headshot with the microphone. So important. Right there on the front page is my contact info. Inside this guide tells them what they can expect, because here it is. Page 2 is how to contact me and why you've made a good choice. Page 3 and 4 is how we work together. Page 5 through 7 is how we wrap it up all nice and neat with a bow, because we got to pick a retail sample together. And we got to talk about how we want to socialize and promote this. And I'm going to tell you what I will and won't do. So my welcome here explains, please take a few minutes to read through this and reach out to me with questions. Here's how you reach out. And then I do a few little things here on why this was a good choice for you. Part of what I do here establishes that as the narrator, I understand how to deliver this package. So I tell them things like, it doesn't mean you're competing with yourself when you have an audiobook and a printed book. You promote one, you sell the other. There are some users who use both for learning to read. If they have reading disabilities, there's immersive reading. And the other bit I mention is that there are English as second language people who want to hear the text read as they read, and they're going to work on their own pronunciations to be more general American or British or whatever, depending who the narrator is. So I give them that basics without getting too far into it. Then I say, here's our production journey. And I explain how we get paid, whether it's royalty share or royalty share plus or PFH. We're going to do the first 15. Here's my prep sheet, and here's what it looks like. And here's my pickup sheet. And what do we pick up and what don't we pick up? This is the part where you go, okay, you're not picking up my performance. You're picking up that I said Pataka, and it came out Patoka. But I just knew it was Pataka. And then the last little bit, I actually, more than one person I've seen put this in their welcome packet, which is just based on the text. Sometimes it's good to go ahead and show them this whole table of, okay, We always do the opening credits. We sometimes do dedications. We never do acknowledgments. This book is for my cat and my dog and my goldfish. I'm going to name them and go on a long reason why they were important. I know that's great, but your listeners are going to be going, I want my story. Get me to my story. They can't just breeze past that. So you set those boundaries. And then the last bit is I say, okay, now that we're off to market, here's first off, we need opening and closing credits, and here's some examples. Because I have had publishers who say, I'm new to audiobooks. What should I put in there? And I'm like, well, here you go. I've also noticed that sometimes ACX suggests credits that they've kind of cobbled together and they're not quite right. They're a little weird. So I don't typically go with ACX's suggested stuff if it's off base. I keep the same rhythm that I've had through most, if not all, of my books. This has been title name. This has been Operation Whiteout, written by Robert G. Williscroft. You get the idea. Show them that and help them, because when you offer them a solution to choose from, that's so much easier than saying, okay, I need you to give me opening and closing credits. You don't know? Well, I can't do them if you don't write them. We never want to be like that. And then I mention retail sample, and then I talk about promotion. Let's connect on social media. I love talking about my projects. So if I'm going to post anything about it, I'm going to keep it spoiler free. Here's an important thing that I heard from publishers recently at a publishers panel. There's a trend now for TikTok and for Discord to go out there and narrate while people watch, and that's fun. But you need to ask your rights holders permission before you read anything online, because there are intellectual property concerns. That sounds kind of goofy. It sounds like some legalese, but it can actually create some real problems for a publisher. It can create problems with the author. It can create problems with rights holding that we don't understand the bigger picture because we're not publishers, or we're not the legal department at Macmillan and Company. So get permission, even though people will be thrilled to say, you're going to read, people are going to get to watch you narrate. Can I watch? Yeah, that's going to be great. Get permission first when you do that. All right. How we doing? Any more questions? Oh, I see chat. Let's take a look. Yes, absolutely. Always get permission. And Rhonda has introduced me to Canva. I haven't played with that much because I'm such an old geezer who loved Photoshop and a Microsoft weenie. I need to look into Canva because I'm hearing folks say that that's a really useful tool.
Dude, it gets better every single day. I just learned yesterday that you can make a website on Canva and publish it directly to a URL. Just saying.
Awesome.
We do have another hand up.
What's that?
We have a hand up there, but I don't know whether it's left over from last
Gudrun,
time.
do we have another question?
No, I just forgot to put my hand down. Sorry.
Okay, good. I'm so
All
sorry.
good.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
I actually do the same ever since Zoom moved it to be reactions, and there's not just a raise hand button. I find myself doing that and forgetting that, oh, reactions will fade after a few seconds, but hand raises are forever. All right. That's actually more than I expected, and I'm really glad this helped everybody. Happy to share more follow-up, but does anybody have any other questions?
Are y'all done covering your welcome packet?
I have pretty much gone through. I did mention, because you're welcome to read the details. So I'd say things. I do actually use this as my chance to say, hey, let's put my name on there because that helps both of us. And I say things like podcasts. You should check and see if there are any podcasts that you could get interviewed on. Podcasts are always looking for people. And if you go on a podcast to be interviewed and you want me to be with you, I'll join you. We can talk about the journey of making an audiobook. Or I can just sit there and laugh about Pataka. And I do wrap it up with the door is always open. Is that everything? I think I covered all the bases for us, but you may still have questions or feedback on this document or just comments about it all. I'm here. And when the book goes off to market, I'm still here. I'll always be glad to talk to you. I look forward to hearing from you anytime you need anything. I'm your partner in this, and I want to help you be successful. And of course, my last sentence, thanks for reading all the way down to the end.
That's awesome. So good. Thank you so much, Trenton. This has been very eye-opening for me as a non-audiobook person.
Cool. You're very welcome. Please feel free to join the long-form narration crew.
Do
Do an
you
audiobook.
want to stop sharing and then we can all chitty chat for a sec before we
Oh,
go?
yeah. And I've got time, by
Um,
the way, to hang out if anybody else does.
Yeah, I've got beer upstairs. Did I say that out loud? Okay.
Oh, Richard, your dream is
Think
to
you
do a
did.
medical audiobook. I love that. I would love to do something like that too, because the technical stuff where I'm talking about lanthanum decahydride, it just gives me a little tingle when I can say those words. And it is cool because you could use this prep sheet to get all those things down ahead of time. When I had my medical narration demo, I really wish I had had this sheet at that time so I could get it all down and not have to sit there and kind of rough it through.
So do you guys have any lingering questions? If so, please, now is the time to ask.
How can we reach you if we think of any questions? I am Trenton at trentonbennett.com. And Rhonda will share that with you. So don't worry if you can't write that down right away. I'm bad with ballpoint pens. I'm a lefty and they tend to break. So you will get that. You're welcome to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook. And I love when people message me. I'm not always good about it because sometimes I'm off doing something else or I'm in here and I've turned the phone off. But I will answer you on a Facebook message when I can. I'm not so good at Twitter. I'm not so good at LinkedIn. I wish I were. But definitely Trenton at trentonbennett.com and Facebook.
No email, huh?
Yeah, the email is fine. I'm pretty good about that.
I'm a social media Luddite. I shouldn't say that out loud, but
It's a mixed bag. I feel you because I don't have the time to be on all of the platforms and socialize stuff. And although I do pre-organize by using Buffer to schedule my outgoing posts, I don't really have time to keep track of everything else.
Yes, I didn't put 2 T's. You're right. 2 T's in Bennett.
Oh yeah, 2 N's and 2 T's.
Yep, I'll put that in the replay email for sure. So
Can I make a comment?
Tina just finished her first audiobook, everybody. Let's give her a oh my God, good job. Seriously, that's a big deal. So
You are mighty.
Oh my God, you guys are so nice. It's been an adventure, I've got to say. So I'm really stoked. I can't wait to start the next one, and just want to get through all the post-production and all that stuff so I can get it up and loaded and on my way. But yeah, it's really fun. It's been a real treat. I mean, honestly, I was just so happy.
sorry, my
And
ducks
to
were
have
quiet.
that many, I mean, like I say, my third book was like that, and I thought, wow. And to be honest with you, my first book was not well written, and I had to kind of work with it. My second book was the one where I had to say no to the rights holder, and they had given me 184 words in Sanskrit and Yiddish,
Oh my God.
and they were
Well,
very
I could
big
do
on
the
me
Yiddish.
being
I'm
correct.
Jewish. I could do that stuff. I could do that good, you know. My
Yes.
first one, I was offered one in October, and it was like, I thought it was, oh my God, this is the best book ever. It was about a border collie, and I have border collies, and it was like the best thing. And she gave me the job. It was $200 for finished hours. Like, sweet. I was thrilled. 2 days later, I didn't have it anymore. She found
Oh.
someone that she liked just about as much, but for $50 an hour less. And it's
Oh my
like,
gosh.
okay, I get it now. All right, you know. Yeah, that was kind of sucky, but whatever. So this one's a royalty share, so I get nothing, you know, for who knows how long, but it's been out for a couple years, and and like I say, it's well written. It kind of reminds me of the Tommy Lee and Pamela, whatever her name is, on Netflix, kind of that same kind of feel. So I'm hoping maybe it'll have some kind of play, you know, going down the road. But
I like the Pamela, whatever her name is.
Well, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever.
It cracks me up.
I mean, he's a pig and it's all good, but whatever. But that's how the main character is in this, just a really awful rock and roll god who's a dick, basically. So it's been really fun. I had to learn to speak French because I had several characters actually speaking French, and I don't speak French at all. And then 2 different French
Well, now you do.
accents. And yeah, it's like, well, that's like we were saying with Google Translate and all the different how to pronounce things are really, and YouTube, looking up on YouTube, how do I say 2 breakfasts in French?
Well, and Trenton also has a lot of YouTube links that I will be including because he has a lot of really great videos on YouTube that can kind of add on to this webinar experience for you guys.
Yeah, I have a colleague, Matt Haynes, who loves to do these accent studies, and he gets comments from locals who say, you nailed it, I love it. Or they'll give him advice and he will adjust and do an update. And he talks about where this lives in the mouth and has a little cartoon of what it looks like. I also really recommend the accents class with Jim Johnson. That guy's the gift that keeps on giving, because I have so many pieces, and every few months I might get, oh, hey, I've updated every dialect in Asia, so just download these 8 files and update yours. And I'm like, wow, okay.
I loved Paul Meyer. He's, British, and he's, he does all the European accents and all the American accents, and it was very intimidating. So I recommend it to anyone, take a Paul Meyer class on the dialects. I was the only one who was not really experienced at it. I mean, there were some people on there that's like, holy cow. I mean, they were doing like Yorkshire perfectly in no time at all. And it's just like, I felt like the biggest idiot on the planet. I mean, I can do RP. Most people can, it's like, it's British. It's easy. But the rest of it, I mean, Scottish and Welsh and all that, it was just like, it was amazing. I really learned a lot all about the whole phonetic system, and I really recommend him for sure. And Jim
remember,
Johnson too. Yeah.
You're that actor taking the stage. No one should ever expect you to be perfectly fluent in all the things.
God,
so
I
just
would
do your
hope not.
best.
I hope not. Because it ain't gonna happen.
I had quite a terrible one, I'll admit. I go back and play it and I'm like, okay, that wasn't as cringeworthy as my brain keeps telling me, but they had a very thick German burr, and I hadn't taken the accents class at the time. I didn't have enough Matt Haynes material, and I just couldn't nail it. It was difficult. But I just did my best because the project had to be done. We needed to finish, and she didn't have too many lines, so that was good. But yeah. Sometimes you just got to do what you can and move forward.
Does anybody else have any general audiobook questions for him really quickly? I don't want to stay too much longer, but Trenton, you've been just a wealth of information tonight.
Thank you so much.
I mean, are any of you here that do audiobooks like half as organized as Trenton? I mean, you have to kind of be, right?
Not as organized.
I am somewhat organized, actually.
Do you have a question? Oh, she's got a thing down. Just be careful of the British accent, guys. It's not easy. Some of the pronunciation are horrible. It really is. It's great. We haven't forgiven you yet for the first Mary Poppins. So be careful.
Oh, Dick Van Dyke and his Cockney accent. Oh,
right. It's also, I'm going to shoot myself.
There are over 160 accents in the UK, so you can't possibly do them all.
Yes, and there's a county called Yorkshire that's got 6, so be careful. Just be
exactly
careful. Yeah.
Sarah, I could listen to you all day.
That's very sweet.
That is awesome.
So just let us know when you're going to ever do this again, Trenton, so we can promote the heck out of it, because I knew you were doing this, but I had no idea this was going to be...
The thing is, I try my very best. You guys have no idea what I do to try to get people into these webinars. Of late, like the last few months, my webinars have just not been going over at all. We've been doing this for years, huh, Sarah? We've just been doing this for years. And I don't know if it's maybe it's time to change it up and not do it so late at night. But sometimes I really don't think people understand the full value of what they're going to get inside these tiny little 90-minute webinars.
I didn't. I I'm blown. I think it's wonderful. So keep sending them, Rhonda.
Oh, I'm trying. I've
Yes,
got them.
please.
Last month's with Deborah Stitt was absolutely mind blowing because with
Make sure
lead
you comment on
generation.
Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you comment on the Facebook page as well, please, because it would be really helpful to Rhonda. She works really hard to get these things together.
I do. I work so
Really,
hard.
she really does.
Social media Luddite will make an effort. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. If you could just
I
write her
know
a comment.
I know
that she
for
can-
me, it's been really hard. I've had a really tough fall. My mom just died 2 weeks ago, and
Oh,
I've been
sorry.
doing all of this, and I have another business that I do full time. That's my own business. And so I've been like crazy, and I've been feeling so bad with all the GVAA stuff that I've signed up for all these different, coaching things. And I've just like had to blow them off because I haven't had time. And I think
but
that,
don't look at it as you're blowing them off. You're prioritizing things that are more important.
yes, but it makes me feel really bad. And I think that's probably a lot with a lot of people. It's just like holiday season's coming up. Things are just crazy. I mean, Rhonda, you have really, honestly, I have enjoyed every single
Sweet.
thing I've
you
done
so
with
much.
you. Every single thing.
Well, hopefully you'll join us on Wednesday the 24th for the Christmas. Oh, sorry, Holly.
I'm gonna. I've got it.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Say
you,
it.
Always
and
fun.
Thank you,
Say it out.
Trenton.
Say it out
Santa has
loud.
cleared his
Yeah.
schedule so he can be here.
Yeah,
I'm so
Richard.
excited.
All right.
So
Awesome.
excited.
What's happening on the 24th?
The 21st.
21st?
Yep,
What's
it's
happening?
Wednesday the 21st. It's my 3rd annual holiday extravaganza gift giveaway. So I have geez, with the things that just got added today, we're probably getting close to $5,000 worth of gifts that I will be giving out that night. Everything
How do
from
we
a
sign
demo.
up for it, Rhonda?
Huh?
How do we sign up for it?
Oh, just
Are
go
you
to
sending
my
out a
event
link
page,
or-
just like you signed up for this. Yeah,
Okay.
just click on the holiday event thing. Just sign up for it. It's free.
Cool.
I'm going
You
to
do
sign
have
up.
to
I'll
be.
there.
You do have to be present.
Yay! We get to hang with Trenton. Woo! That's worth a ticket.
Going to be fun.
Thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up. I so appreciate all of you lovely people being here with me tonight. And the obligatory picture, if you're all up for it, I would love to take a quick little screenshot of everybody. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Get my best side, Ron.
Oh,
I'm sure my little stick person smiled really nicely. So that's
all
great.
your sides are your best sides, Sarah.